in the beginning, is that India has a solution to each of these problems because we have the complete array of programs which can deal with all aspects of the problems that we know exist. But before I do that, I want to just start with a small story. It was almost 25 years ago when a colleague of mine in the IS was working in Delhi. He's a very famous writer in Malayalam, so he comes from Kerala, but he belonged to the Bihar cadre. And he told me, Santhosh, I have a fantastic time in Delhi. I asked him, sir, why? He said, because I have a peon from Bihar and a PA from Kerala. I thought that's a rather racist sort of comment to make, but it stuck in my head. And then many years later, when I also experienced that there is a further twist to this racist remark, and that's my time in Bihar, when I noticed that peons are rather dumb in Bihar. And then when I looked further into the problem, I found that most peons come from a certain section of society which is deprived, and therefore would, I guess, have experienced child malnutrition. And therefore what you're really seeing here is a consequence of generations of children who have been deprived, and the consequences of that for equity, for bias of the kind that what my colleague then remarked, are actually truly fundamental. And then about 4 years ago, when I became Principal Secretary Social Welfare, I thought I had a fantastic opportunity to start to address this problem. I had social pensions with me, I had the ICDS program with me, and I thought that was a rather good sort of mix to begin to work on this problem. But the problem there I found was the following. We have what we call a tick box administration in India. And what's a tick box administration? A tick box administration is that you have a certain set of things to do, and we will simply tick by saying, okay, this done, this done, this done. A very good example of this is cash transfer that they tried with kerosene in Alwar. Fantastic. You know, they reduced leakage. Anybody who would buy kerosene in that particular taluk would get a subsidy, cash delivered into his bank account. Kerosene uptake dramatically reduced, and everybody was happy. On the urging of the Chief Economic Advisor about 2 months ago, I went to Alwar, and I found, yes, indeed, the leakage in kerosene had come down to 0 in Alwar, but that's because people stopped taking kerosene. The subsidy reached too late. They didn't know when the subsidy would reach. Multiple trips to the bank meant that the amount of money they had to forego to be able to get that subsidy was much higher, and the anger, the palpable anger that people demonstrated at that time was truly scary. The point I'm trying to make here is that the problem with nutrition in India is that it's too much of a science question, and it's too much of a nutrition expert problem. And then when we can't deal with it, we say it's a problem of state capacity, or we say if you want to get even more esoteric, you will say political will. So we put a label and we park the problem. But just look at the sort of democratic experience of India in a more distant way. And I'm delighted that, there is so much that's being talked about, conditional cash transfers, social protection. But in the 1970s, when, I don't know how many of you remember, there was this politician called M.G. Ramachandran in Tamil Nadu. And then this entire, AIDMK, DMK competition, and what it led to, and those times they were abused for being very populist. And today, the populism of the 70s has become social protection of the 21st century, and we glorify it. I'm glad, we've made that transition. But then again, how do we do the administration of programs of this kind, especially when we are operating a tick box administration? And there are reasons behind this. I mean, I'm a student of economics and political science, and therefore you will pardon me if I talk a language that may not sort of, appeal to some of you. I know some faces on the in the audience who would, I know, vehemently agree with me. The point is that at the end of the day, today an elected representative faces a 5-year tenure, of which he has basically 2.5 years to actually craft a program and to supervise it, because otherwise it's the euphoria of victory or the uncertainty of the next election. Couple that with the administration, which has a less than 2-year tenure as well. My tenure in social welfare in Bihar was all of 2 months. And Secretary's Government of India, largely less than a year. The point that I'm making is that we have to build on the evidence that people like Harold present before us and carve out a way in which India as a society, India as an economy, and India as a political sort of setup can actually sort of get to doing something that will make it imperative for India, Indian society, the Indian economy and Indian politics to actually begin to attack this. And I think the signs are very good. And let me tell you why I feel the signs are very good. If you look at this, the enduring way in which the state of Tamil Nadu has moved. I mean, today you have Amma Idlis there. I mean, come on. You may laugh at it, but at the end of the day, it's nutrition. Now, if you look at what even a state of UP is doing, laptops to children, to youths. Basically, what this is telling you is that there is actually a market. There's a political market for intervention for which the politician can take credit for. And unless we can find programmatic sort of formations, programmatic devices that don't just talk of the science and the esoterics of why and what works in nutrition, we will also have to put that small micronutrient into this paradigm that also makes it politically salient and makes it work for this sort of tick-box administration that we have actually produced, especially when it comes to the social sectors. But thanks to a large middle class, thanks to an appetite for increased growth rates, and thanks to a much younger sort of electorate, at least this question of infrastructure, of growth, of price stability, all these are very, very high on the sort of political radar. And as a person who works from the inside, I can see that that doesn't need too much of attention. It will take care of itself. But when it comes to social sector programming, I think we are still a deep casualty, and the narrative within government that this can actually mean wasteful expenditure. For example, there are many who feel that MGNREGS is actually wasteful expenditure till the democratic impetus was brought to bear and the economic rationale for rural distress kicked in, and the fact that FMCG companies were facing a market question. When all these three came together, then we have a huge appetite to be able to now pushing MGNREGS as a vehicle that government needs to support. The point is, how can we do this with nutrition? I find nutrition also very, very interesting for another reason. And that reason is what Harold, so beautifully told us. And that's that nutrition cannot be addressed by putting food into the mouths of people, whether they be children or they be adolescents or whether they be adults. I mean, Robert Chambers puts it so powerfully when he says, just not what happens here, it's also what happens here and what's in between that is so important if we have to get nutritional success. I mean, he does it far better than I can possibly do. But then, this is a study which he had cited, and people who work with me have brought it up for me. And that's the Ghosh Gupta Spears 2014 Bangladesh and Bengal comparison, which I think is very powerful, where they have shown that where even if you can hold a household wealth as a constant, you will find that Bangladesh with much lower per capita incomes does so much better in the height for age score. And even when you hold individual wealth constant. So there's really an argument here for things that government needs to do in terms of behavioral change, in terms of sanitation outcomes. Now, the great thing about nutrition that I was alluding to is the fact that you cannot get nutritional outcomes unless an entire plethora of things that government does actually falls in place. It's education, it's social protection, it's sanitation. I would even go in far as saying that even infrastructure has a bearing to has a bearing on this. And therefore, what nutrition really provides us is a fantastic metric with which to measure the progress that our country is making. But the problem is, whenever we measure progress in this country, we measure that on administrative lines. We say the country has done well vis-a-vis other countries. Come on, yeah, who's interested in the electoral market about that measure? They will say that, you know, Bihar has made great progress compared to what it had done 10 years ago. Yes, some sort of electoral salience does exist with that kind of a narrative. But then you go deeper, we have data perhaps at the district level. Who cares about the district? IAS officers like me do care, because my performance appraisal, maybe I can write that we've done. But then all these results come so late. I've actually moved probably, 6 posts by the time the data would come, and it's not even useful for my annual performance appraisal. Mm-hmm. So the point is, can we therefore use this power of nutritional outcomes and its interdependency to actually construct indices, metrics that are then reported upon on electoral constituency basis to be able to generate the demand for the kind of things we believe are important for India? It's 1 minute more or 1 minute over? 1 minute more, okay. So I believe that if we can simply change the way we report some of the stuff that we do in India, and in addition to administrative boundaries, also package them in terms of electoral districts, MLA constituency-wise, MP constituency-wise, panchayat-wise, if we can, it's an expensive business, and the gestation will be exceedingly long, but can we think of doing this is one question that I want to be able to put on the table for you. The second point that I want to make is a problem with government procurement. The problem is that things that require long-term engagement, behavioral change, is something which government firmly and rightly in the current state of play believes it's incompetent to do so. So what does it do? It does the easy things. If it's sanitation, it's toilets. If it's nutrition, it's ICDS program, and even in the ICDS program, it's probably building the Anganwadi Kendra, or just saying what is the level of vacancy of Anganwadi Sevikas. It's not what happens inside the Anganwadi Kendra that's really important. I look after skills. So if it's skills, it's how many million people who have skilled, where they actually have the attitude, knowledge and skills to be called skills, nobody in government is bothered about, because we dare not look in that direction, because we know we don't have the capacity to do that. So we have to look at another way of partnership, recognizing this weakness in government, and therefore can we blend government money, which is very risk averse, and philanthropic money, multilateral money, other donor monies. Can we find a way in which these can actually be packaged together in such a way that people who have the ability to deliver all the important but soft but more difficult and prone to failure items are actually delivered from outside the government procurement system, but are done in such a way that they work in tangent, they work in tandem? If we can do that, I believe we can make some more progress in terms of the supply side of the nutrition question that we have. And as far as the demand side, I've already told you, have the proposition of electoral constituencies on the table for you.